Hi everyone, I am Kayla Matthews and this is my week 3 video response. And so to begin, my definition is a behavioral trait to influence an audience to produce change towards a specific goal. And so as I'm reading through the criteria, I believe that my definition is quite broad. And so as we go through the criteria, which are making sure it's clear and specific, making sure it's usable by practitioners, scholars, things along those lines, making sure that it could be differentiated, through different components, different topics, and then having essential elements to make sure that people who discuss leadership can fully identify, as quoted, the phenomenon of leadership itself, making sure that people are able to understand and differentiate, leadership is not management. And when people get in the workforce, that can be confused pretty often. And so I think that, despite it being broad, I do believe that it is pretty clear. People can understand that it is more of, when we just talk about a leader, we talk about more about the influence, the guidance, an individual or multiple people come together as a captain to lead them. It's not a CEO versus a regular worker. There's quite a difference between the two. But when we're discussing, differentiating between concepts, the book actually talked about, the difference between leadership and management and how does it differ between the two. And so I actually looked up the definition via Merriam-Webster on management. And so management is actually defined as conducting or supervising of something. And so when we think of management, I actually think of the scenario we just discussed in the text yesterday for our discussion. So the scenario between Betsy and Marianne, how Marianne was more of a leader. She wanted to mentor, the younger employees, making sure that they felt like their needs were being met, as an organization, and making sure that they are being included alongside, checking how, their mental health is being affected, by work and how it actually does improve progress in the workforce. And then Betsy, on the other hand, is an old-fashioned leader, stern, has strict expectations. So she managed them, but she wasn't guiding them. And so I think there's definitely a difference between the two. And so when we discuss my definition of going back to a behavioral trait, so I discuss it as a behavioral trait versus just, acting as an individual that has responsibility, is because leadership is not a right. Leadership is a privilege. And so having the ability to have a leadership position is earned by someone that has shown these characteristics, that want to influence a group of people, influence an audience to be able to move forward, in scenarios like that, versus an individual that, may take a position due to money, things along those lines. And so even in the workforce, you can definitely see people that tend to mentor versus managing. And so that's why I think that mine definitely meets that concept, is because, my definition doesn't discuss how leadership is just watching over people. You're not watching over people, you're educating, you're understanding individuals in your group, you're making sure that, it's not just each individual piece, like it's one puzzle as a whole. And so on to the next question. I did individual scenario number 1. And so it discusses Tara running the organization with the trees and how it was very successful and she did very well. And so the questions were, is she a leader? And what criteria of leadership does it meet in order for her to be, officially a leader? And so when I read this, I had the perception that here's kind of where perspective matters. I think she was more a leader in the beginning, but a manager towards the end. And so the reason why I say that is because, she was guiding these individuals to want to be a part of this organization, that benefits from, growing these trees, raising this money for charity, things along those lines. But then in the end, she was a part of this organization, but as a whole, like, she isn't the sole person leading this group. there's other individuals towards it. And so I think, yes, she is a leader, but I do think there's a balance between her leading and her managing. And so when I'm looking through this, what criteria of leadership, do you answer to this? And so when I'm looking at it, I think it has to do with the essential elements of fully identifying the phenomenon. Only because in the beginning it solely talks about like she single-handedly is raising this money. She is single-handedly pushing this organization towards success. And so when I'm reading through this, yes, I do think she's managing towards the end because it's very successful. It's raising all this money, which is a positive benefit. And that's when we talk about a leader having a positive influence. So there's one, but then also managing a company as well. And so I do think there's a balance between the two. And then at what point did you think that she became a leader? As I was reading the scenario, I would say the beginning. So right from the get-go, it discussed how she was very successful in influencing one another to be able to participate in growing trees and raising the money. And so she maintained that throughout the end, but I think it kind of related more to management and leadership rather than her just leading these individuals, And so, but that is just my perspective, and that concludes my response for today. Thank you.